tad. We could always do sign language. That would be quite a podcast.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah. So where are you from in the UK?
Just in London.
Where in London? It's a big
So
place.
near Wimbledon. Near Wimbledon, sort of southwest London.
Right.
Near sort of Waterloo, that sort of area. Yeah.
Yeah. I lived in East London for a bit.
Which part was it? Was it Brick Lane or something?
Loughton.
Loughton. Okay. And how do you find the UK as a whole? What did you think of London? Our characteristics of personas?
Well, London is not really the UK as a whole. Very different from the other places I've been in the UK. It was cool. I liked we were living in like a pretty small town on the outskirts, so that was pretty nice because I have kids, and still close to the city.
Okay.
The one thing I find is that everything takes a long time. Everything is very slow.
I'd say, could you elaborate on that? I can get what you're going at, but what do you mean?
Well, I mean, because I live in Reykjavik, in a town of 230,000 people, something like that.
Okay.
And you can go out and you can do like 10 different things. In London, if you have to do something, you only do one thing, and that's your whole day. You don't plan several things. If you're going to have to go somewhere, that takes 5 hours to get there and back. I find that everything takes a long time to get done.
And you think it's because there's too many people in London, effectively? It's too densely populated.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah,
it's pretty. That's and also, I mean, it's. I guess. In terms of the area isn't that huge, but it is a pretty big place.
Yeah, very congested. Exactly.
Dense and big.
And like New York as well, that's quite mad, isn't it? That's even worse.
I've never been to New York. I've never been there, but I imagine that it is, yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. And I've never been to like Norway or Sweden or Iceland and Denmark. I want to head over at some point because I know that you guys are handling the virus better than here.
Well, it's not going great in Iceland at the moment. We're in like the third wave now, and it's getting pretty bad.
Really, what's happened?
I guess we opened things up too quickly, and now we're back on pretty serious lockdown. So
it will be all. I mean, when this is all over, I mean, the performing arts across the world are going to be, really greatly appreciated. Like, people are going to be flocking to whatever's left of like music, comedy, and all of that. They're like, oh, so many years we've not watched any of this live. Oh, there's a comedy or music here. We're going.
Well, yeah, I hope so. I know my father, he's a comedian and actor, and he does everything. He's very concerned that we might never be going back. We're just not going to have those big events anymore. So I don't know. Hopefully he's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, there's still some things that have gone on during the summer in the UK, despite all that's happened.
Yeah, we've had stuff here as well.
But one thing I want to ask, so I don't get it wrong, because I always do this. Mm-hmm. I want to get your name right, and Evander.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Eyvindur.
Eyvindur. Cool. Got it.
Yeah. Great.
I've passed the test now.
Yes, you're an honorary Icelander now.
So, I mean, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast as a whole, and yeah, we're gonna find out about music and like what sort of music you're into, and I'm looking forward to how you sort of balance like being a musician during these times and like also having a family and
Right.
kids. I mean, that is intriguing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I've been a musician for, I mean, for all of my life, really. But I've been sort of semi-professional as a musician for, I guess, 20 years. And well, now, I mean, I'm not playing live really. I haven't done the live streaming thing that a lot of people have been doing, because I used to do a lot of that before COVID, and then everybody else got into it, and I said, yeah, let's do something else now. So I've been writing and recording, and just, I guess, waiting for, because I have an album almost ready, and I guess I'll release that next year. I was going to do it about November, but I figured I'd postpone it so that hopefully I can do some live shows when I release it. And but I'm lucky in that a lot of the things I do, I mean, I have a podcast as well, and I'm a translator, and I write and all that kind of stuff. And I'm lucky in that I can do all that from home, and I've been doing it from home. So for me, not a lot changed really with the virus, except I can't play live music.
And what's so what sort of languages do you translate as a whole? And what's
I translate from English into Icelandic.
okay, nice and straightforward.
That's basically it. Sometimes yeah, it's pretty easy. Sometimes I work from Danish or Swedish, but then I'll usually have the English script as well. I don't speak Danish very well. I can read it okay, but I don't. My Danish is terrible.
Okay. You know enough to order coffee in Denmark, but you don't know enough to sort of engage in philosophical discussions.
Yeah. Although even when I try to order coffee or a hot dog or some simple things in Denmark, the Danes always just cut me off, and they say, just speak English. I don't understand the word you're saying. You sound awful. And so I've never been able to work on my Danish because they just switch to English immediately, and they never allow me. So I blame this on the Danes. Definitely, it's their fault that my Danish is terrible.
That's one of the things I found when I went to Paris. I tried speaking French to them, but they're like, "Your French is shit, so we're just going to speak to you in English."
That's what I found as well, and because everybody warned me that the French were very rude, and that they refused to speak English. But when I actually went to France, it was not like that at all. They were all very nice, and they said, "Yeah, your French is terrible. Let's just do this." Everybody speaks English. So yeah, no, I found the French to be very pleasant people,
It's surprising.
as opposed to the Danes. They're horrible.
Are they? Oh, okay. We're going into do we have a story here?
I'm Icelandic. I'm required by law to say that. Like if I was Scottish, I would have to say that the English are terrible people. It's just no matter if you feel that way personally or not, you just have to say it, right?
Of course, you got to stay with your tribe.
Yeah, exactly. No, my neighbor is Danish. I have no problem with the Danish people. It's just a thing that we say because we used to be a Danish colony,
Bit of banter.
Of course.
Now, one thing that I find interesting. So you've been doing music all your life, effectively, and like, how did you get to the process of it becoming was it your full-time job before lockdown, or?
Not full time, no. Well, I do music for theater. Sometimes, I'll get hired for to write and usually perform in the shows. And so at those times, it effectively becomes my full-time job for a while. And I'm sorry, what was the question again?
So, what would you say that you are a part-time musician as a whole? Is that before COVID?
Yes, I'm a part-time.
And how did it get to the stage where you became a part-time musician? Like, how did you get to that stage?
Right. Well, so there are several things. There are different streams of revenue, I guess, and they each have their own in. So I do sell music, and I make a little bit of money. I don't make a living selling music, but I've certainly made money that way and bought food with it, so that counts. And that's just I do online marketing, email marketing, stuff like that. I also have a small tour company which is not functioning right now, but I do free walking tours around Reykjavik. And that's a great place to sell CDs. You've spent an hour and a half telling people stories and jokes, and they've been getting to know you a little bit. And then you say, oh, by the way, I have a CD for sale, and they're tipping you anyway. So they might pay you a little extra and get a CD. And so that's one thing. That's one part of it, is selling music. And obviously when I play live, a lot of the times you're playing live and you're not getting paid, or you're getting paid very little, and then you sell CDs and t-shirts and things. And playing live you get a little bit of money from that. I have in the past been in that situation of playing cover songs for money, playing 3 hours of cover songs. I don't do that anymore because I hate it, but that was something that I used to do for money. But playing original songs, I certainly, I've been doing this for long enough that I can do that, but I can't do it consistently enough because my market is so small. So I can maybe get away with doing one gig like that a month and making a little bit of money, but not to sustain myself completely. But then again, the theater has been my biggest source of revenue as far as music goes over the past few years. And that was something that I kind of lucked into. I got hired for one job, and then, I started getting more.
Okay.
But so, I would say that it's all about just being active, getting yourself out there. And then, once you've established a little bit of a track record for playing live, or for writing for a theater, or for doing this or that, paid your dues, so to speak, then things start coming to you. Although, of course, you have to work very hard on getting your name out there too.
Yeah. I mean, what do you think of, there's quite a few musicians that have made their big name in the early days of YouTube, like Justin Bieber, like just producing these videos and then boom. And then you hear a couple of other artists, and then now people releasing some of their songs on TikTok, and they use them as sort of like backing tracks.
Well, yeah, I don't know. It's been the same way forever, right? Since music was first recorded, there's this great documentary series called American Epic. It's a documentary about the early days of folk music recording. When music sort of started to spread to the middle class and lower classes. And before that, it was all classic music. And then the rich people got radios. And so the record company started marketing to the lower classes, and they started recording these folk artists and early country artists. And all this roots music was being recorded. This was in the 1920s. And there you got these breakout stars when, these record producers were going around recording people like Mississippi John Hurt and the Carter Family and all of these artists that became, those were the Justin Biebers of that time, right? Because they were pioneering this new media. And I think, it's happened with everything, with music videos, when MTV was a new thing. And then when YouTube was first becoming an avenue for musicians, that's when we got Justin Bieber and all those artists. And now you have TikTok, and before that it was something else, I guess. I don't know. Have there been Instagram musicians? I don't know. But I mean, I think it's always going to be like that. But I also think that it's a mistake to try to force yourself as an artist into oh, this is the new thing, I have to do this now. Like now I think a lot of people are thinking, well, TikTok is, you have to be on TikTok if you're going to be a musician. And I don't think that's necessarily true. I mean, it probably depends on your market and all of that, but also just what you are good at. I would be terrible. I don't even understand TikTok at all. I'm too old. So it would just be ridiculous for me to try to follow that trend, because I think it's very rare that following a trend like that actually works. I think the people who break out are they catch lightning in a bottle, and it's part luck. Of course, it's talent as well, but I think they're just at the right place at the right time, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, I love to see that happen. It's great. And even though these are mostly musicians that I don't listen to, I think it's really cool when somebody gets that moment. But for 99% of us, it's much more about just hard work and trying to be smart about what you're doing and doing it right.
How does it sort of work? Because in comedy, you can't, like, comedians, they do well at spots, and then they get spotted, and then they get into open spots at big clubs, and then there's comedy competitions, and particularly comedy competitions. If you do well in comedy competitions, the chances are you get signed by a big agency, and then they put you on TV. But the one thing that's interesting about comedy is, no matter how high you're up, you're still going to find TV comics doing open mics to work on their material. I mean, and you will get open mic comedians mixing in with top tier comedians. I mean, how often does that happen, per se, with music?
I don't think it happens very much at all. And I think that's a shame, really. I used to be in comedy, and the difference is, and the reason why I left comedy was because it's so time intensive, as you know. I mean, you have to be performing as much as you can, and you have to perform in front of people. And that takes a lot of time, and you have to be away all hours doing that. And once I had kids, I couldn't be away every night. So the reason I sort of chose music as my outlet more than comedy was that I can stay in my room and play guitar and work on my craft, which doesn't work with comedy. You need that live feedback.
Yeah.
So for that reason, I think that's why it doesn't happen with musicians as much. Although there are musicians who do that. Like Glenn Hansard, he'll go out and busk when he's touring. Do you know Glenn Hansard?
No, Glenn Hansard. No. I'll look him up.
He's Irish. He's a folk artist. And I know that when he's touring, he'll go out and busk on the streets wherever he is. A friend of mine saw him busking in Reykjavik once. And I saw him like warming up because he had a new band that he was playing with, like a big show the next day. And so I saw him like in this tiny little hole of a bar, just getting the band together because he had an Icelandic band that he hadn't played with before. So those sort of things will happen sometimes. I know the Stones, I don't know if they do this anymore, but they used to go into blues clubs. They'd be in New York and they'd go into a blues club and play a set. So it does happen, but it's rare. And I think it's just because those people enjoy doing it. It's not something that's necessary for you to do. Whereas in comedy, like you said, you know, you need that because you're working on new material. You can't charge people the same price for a show where you're just honing your material and working on new stuff as you can with a fully polished show. So it's a very different medium.
What about with how does a musician generally sort of go up through the ranks and get bigger and more famous and like?
Well, I mean, nowadays it's changed so much from what it was, 20 years ago. And now I don't think there are any rules anymore. You know, some of them, those big ones, just like, yeah, it's TikTok or YouTube or whatever, and somebody spots them and signs them or something. But of course now, the beautiful thing about music now is that you don't have to have a record label anymore. You don't have to have a manager or a promoter or anything like that. You can do everything yourself. I mean, it's very cheap to release music now. And especially if you only do it digitally, then it's almost nothing. And, most people can afford to have a small recording studio in their house. I mean, look at Billie Eilish. Her brother produced her album in his bedroom and cost nothing. And she's the biggest artist in the world now. So it's become much more, I don't know, democratic, if you want to call it that. And there are now ways for you to market your music and make money from it without spending too much money. And if you're a solo artist, then you can actually make a living just from your bedroom, because you don't need that huge, you don't need millions of fans to make a living. You can have a couple of thousand, and you'll be doing all right, if you market your stuff the right way. And so I think, I mean, I have friends. I have a friend who's a full-time musician. He's a touring artist, so I guess right now he's not really working. But normally, he books a tour in Europe, because obviously, again, we're in a very small market. So he'll tour Germany and Poland and Scandinavia like twice a year, and that'll be enough for him to make a living. And then, of course, he plays every now and then in Iceland as well, but again, can't do it as frequently. So, and for him, he's not a world famous star or anything. He's got his following, and it's decent, but it's he's very much just built it on his own without a big record label or anything like that. So I think I don't think there's any one path. There are so many different things that you can do to rise through the ranks as a musician.
One thing I want to ask you is most of the music he performs in English?
No, it's both. I'd say for him, it's about 50-50 probably, Icelandic and English. And he actually told me that he finds that, especially in Germany, people are more excited about hearing music in Icelandic than in English. I don't know what that would be like in the UK or America, but I think in Germany, they're very interested in that. And also, it probably depends on your genre of music. I know that, like in heavy metal, for instance, because he's a folk artist, and in folk music, it's probably that's where it comes from. It's I mean, this is of course Western Americanized folk music in a way, sort of in the vein of Bob Dylan or whatever, something like that. But it comes from a traditional roots, so it makes sense that it could work in any language. And I know that in heavy metal, it's actually, at least I've heard theory that it's preferable. If you're an Icelandic heavy metal band, then you should sing in Icelandic, and heavy metal fans appreciate that more than if you're an Icelandic band that sings in English. And I know that the most famous heavy metal band from Iceland, which is called Skálmöld, all of their lyrics are in Icelandic, and they're they're pretty big in the metal scene in Europe. So, but I would imagine that if you're there are probably some genres of like pop music where it wouldn't work as well. I don't know. But.
I think that's one of the strengths of music, because you can perform. People don't always need to necessarily know the words and understand the language it's in for it to be successful. Like in Asia, Korean
universal language.
Yeah, Korean boy bands, they're taking over the place and they don't even understand Korean. So that's...
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, to that point, I mean, I have several friends who are comedians who've been performing in the UK and various other places, and obviously they need to spend a lot of time translating their material and then rehearsing their material in English, which is a lot of work. But again, that of course again comes down to us having a very, very small market, so they need to do that to make more money. But it's different with music.
One of the things I do find quite interesting, though, have you heard of tape face?
Tape face sounds like a fetish.
It does sound like a fetish, but it's an American. He's a Kiwi comedian who's basically a mime act, and he does. Yeah, there's no sound, no language. He just does different things, and he's able to tour across the world.
Sure.
And that's the only sort of comedian.
Of course, yeah.
Like, apart from maybe Eddie Izzard, who actually goes through all this process of learning different languages, he's maybe one of the only few that I've heard in comedy that are very translatable.
Yeah. Well, I guess clowns work in any language.
Yeah. Anything visual, like getting split pie in your face, getting cracked.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's anyone that's not going to laugh if they see someone get kicked in the balls in a certain way. If this,
in a certain way, getting kicked in the balls in a certain way, yeah.
But okay, so in some ways it's quite similar to comedy, because there's also many ways you could do it in comedy. But in regards to like getting agents and all that in music, how would someone go and do that? Do they just gig across different tours and then surprisingly someone who's an agent is there and they sign them up?
Well, I've never had an agent myself. I would imagine that no, that's not how you do it. I don't think there are agents showing up to many gigs. There are these industry books of contacts that you can buy, where you can where there's going to be a list of agents for different types of musicians. And so I would, you would just contact those, and then networking. A lot of it is just performing in different festivals around the world, most of the time for free. There's a festival that I play every year called the Melodica Festival, which is sort of a singer-songwriter festival that's international. So I've played it in several countries now, including the UK and the US and Iceland, of course. And there you'll get to know a bunch of musicians who are in the same type of music as you are. And I know that a lot of professional relationships have grown out of that, because you meet so many people. And my friend who I was referring to before, I know that's how he got an agent, although I think he's been doing this for a pretty long time. But that's how that all started. He started originally touring just with friends, or performing with sharing the bill with some friends in their local markets. So that's usually the way you'll start going out of your own market and networking, and that's how eventually he got an agent. So I think those are the two main reasons. It's not the reasons. The two main methods of reaching somebody like that is either through networking or through those industry resources where there's a list of different people in the industry you can contact.
One thing I want to ask as well. So you're on a sort of a podcast alongside like being a musician and like working theatres, and like how do you sort of balance them all together? How do you?
Well, that's a great question, and that's possibly. I mean, time management is possibly the biggest struggle. And I'm also a university student now because I had a tourism business, and that obviously is not working right now. So I decided to do something more with my time. So I'm studying marketing now. But basically, I stopped watching TV a lot at night. I just started going to bed earlier and getting up earlier. So I get up at 6 so I can have a little bit of time to write and be creative in the morning before I need to get my kids out of bed and start working on the actual things that I get paid for and stuff like that. And I have a planner, just a paper planner where I write down stuff. I have the old-fashioned kind of planner. Just every day I write down, okay, this is what I have to get done. This is what would be nice to get done. And then I try to set up my day so that I actually get it done. And I also write down goals, because again, I'm doing, as you said, I have the music and I have all of this, I have the podcast and different things. And it's so much easier to flake on yourself than it is to flake if you have a job working for somebody else. And so I find writing down my goals, sort of this is what I want to get done this year or this quarter or this month or this week. This is the stuff that I really want to get done now. And then, try every day to think, okay, yes, there are these things that I absolutely have to get done. But then if I have more time, prioritize? What do I want to do first to accomplish all of these things, like this album that I'm working on that nobody's going to fire me if I don't get it done. It's just going to suck for me if I don't get it done. So I find that that helps a lot. Just every morning getting up and looking at that and thinking, okay, how can I use my time today most effectively?
Okay. And how do you adjust it based on your day? How do you you've planned this and that, and then boom, this happens, that happens?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the times, most of the time I'll come up with this great plan for what I'm going to do. And then maybe half of it actually happens if I'm lucky. So it's not like I'm this super organized person just because I have a book that I write stuff in. Like you said, things come up and your plans get derailed, and that happens every day. And a lot of the times I'll make a great plan. Yeah, I'll do this and this and this. And then I forget to take into account that I have to cook my meals and eat them and use the bathroom and all of these things that actually take up time during your day. It's very easy to plan this. Yes, I'll spend an hour doing this. And then I realize, well, it actually takes 4 hours to get that done. So, it's just, try to roll with the punches. This planner that I have, if I write something down that I'm going to get done and I realize that it's not going to get done, I'll just put a little arrow to say, okay, I'll do it tomorrow. And then if I'm doing that every day, then I realize, all right, I'm either going to do this now or I'm not going to do it at all. Eventually it'll get to that point that this stuff that I said I was going to do 3 days ago, I haven't done it yet. So am I actually going to do it now, or am I just going to forget about it? So a lot of the times it'll happen like that. And sometimes you just have to say no to stuff as well. Sometimes something comes up and I actually just have to say, no, I can't deal with that. I'm going to have to, I said I was going to do this, and it is important. So I think it's very easy to put yourself last. These things, like your craft or your art, that are not as time sensitive as something else. Sometimes you just have to put it first. And if somebody calls you and say, hey, can you go take care of this, or can you do that? Sometimes you just have to say, no, I can't, because I made an appointment.
Yeah.
Even if that appointment is just with yourself, you just need to prioritize. And if you have a goal related to something that you're working on, like me, I'm working on an album, and some days I just have to put that first and say, I'm going to get this part of this song done today, and I'm not going to let anything derail that. And that's, for me, it tends to be pretty easy because I control my time. If I have an assignment that I'm getting paid for, I can push it sometimes, and I have that flexibility. Of course, not everybody does that, but then again, if you're serious about it, then try doing it before you go to work in the morning, or after you put the kids to bed at night, or something like that.
What so one thing I want to ask on top of that, what does your sort of podcast focus on? Tell us a bit about the podcast.
Well, it's about creative entrepreneurship and the sort of more marketing and business focused side of that. Okay. So the things that us as creative people tend to be bad at, and that I'm certainly bad at it. So that's why I have people come on, interview people who know stuff that I don't, so that I can learn, and people who listen can learn alongside me. I don't think anybody's perfect in any of those areas. I have certain things that I'm good at and a lot of things that I'm not good at. So it's all about this collective learning. I kind of have this dream of having a community of creative business people who sort of collaborate to help each other reach their goals and make their artistic business bigger and better.
Yeah, I have a similar sort of thing. Like I said, like in the podcast itself, at the moment, the main focus is on people that have made what they like their main job. And like, if you want to get to a certain place, interview people who have already made it there, and then you can learn it. And if people learn from, if people into that, they can go on with you.
Yeah, exactly. That's my focus. I think that's you should always be learning new stuff. And again, I went back to university. And I think that the minute you stop learning, then your life is over.
One thing I want to ask, so how long have you been running the podcast for as a whole?
Well, I'm sort of relaunching it now. I started it last year, and first I started another podcast, which was just a songwriting podcast. And then I decided to pivot and started a new one, which was this one. And then things in my life got very overwhelming. Again, my time management failed, and I took a little break, and that break turned into over a year, and so now I'm back. So it's kind of brand new right now.
Because I mean, I've spoken to a few. I've only spoken to in the podcast. I spoke to one person I think a couple of days ago who just about made a successful career out of the podcasting, and he said one of the things
Yeah.
he does is because the editing and all that takes a lot of time, and what he does is he tries not to worry too much about that and just he really sort of researches the guests beforehand, so that when he talks to them, he doesn't have to do too much to it and can go on and produce seamlessly rather than like making this right, making that right.
Yeah, I tend not to edit a lot. You know, I do some research beforehand, and then I kind of just see where it goes. And usually, I don't really need to do that much editing. But I guess also so far, I've been lucky in that the people I've brought on have been interesting and articulate, and you know, it's just been pretty effortless.
Yeah.
So touch wood. Hopefully, that just continues.
Everything.
But it is time consuming. Of course, I kind of have the advantage of having been a recording artist and recording myself for a long time. So when it comes to audio editing and all of that stuff, I work very fast too. So I kind of have a lot of shortcuts that are, because editing a podcast is much easier than editing a song in many ways.
Oh, would you care to enlighten me and other people listening who can only play the flute?
Well, well, if you need to edit something in a song, then everything needs to line up. You have a rhythm and you have musical notes, and there's a lot of room, or not a lot of room for error. Rather, there's no room for error. When you're editing dialogue, then it's sort of, as long as you don't really hear a click, then you're sort of fine. And it's usually, at least for me, I find that you know, it's very, very easy to just, you know, there's not a lot that can go wrong there.
It's I find it quite interesting. I think did you do a lot of podcasts on Zoom or on face to face? Because I think I'm going to do, even when everything's all over, I think I'm going to do a lot of podcasts on Zoom regardless.
Well, I mean, most of my podcast guests are in other parts of the world. So I use a service called Squadcast, which is very cool because it records on both sides at the same time. So you're not recording a stream over the internet. You're actually, the guest is recording it on his or her side, and then it uploads into the server. So the audio quality is much higher. And then you get the two different tracks, so I can put it in, and if somebody coughs or something, I can edit it out. And so that's what I use, and I've always used that because I think I've recorded like 1 or 2 interviews face to face. Other than that, it's all been remotely.
It's
just this morning I did an interview, 2 interviews, one with a guy in Taipei, Taiwan, and the other one in Las Vegas.
Oh, so. Nice.
Yeah, because you know there are. The guy in Taipei is an American author who teaches English in Taiwan, and the other guy is a motivational speaker and a life coach.
God, there's a lot of that in America. There's a hell of a lot of that.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever known a life coach in Iceland. I don't think I've heard of one. I'm sure there are some. I've never heard of them.
They're not big yet.
No, I think we just drink and bear it.
Drink and bear it. Whatever's going on.
We don't grin and bear it. We drink and bear it.
Right. Oh, I had a shit day at work. Right. Better now. Boom. Next day. Who said that alcohol was bad for
Well,
you?
it's yeah, it's in the UK. I find it a lot easier to be a drunk because the beer is only 3% and the bar closes at 11, so you're home at a reasonable hour. Here, everything is very strong and everything stays open until 1, 2, 3 o'clock. So it's you sleep too little and your liver can't handle it.
Yeah. So you're used to it you're used to it in Iceland. You trained for it. In England, the beers and that are nothing. But in Iceland, it's like you've been working out with all these pints. Oh, what's this pint of Guinness? This is nothing, mate.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's no, it's Icelanders we're like half like genealogically we're half Irish, half Norwegian, which means that we talk funny and drink a lot.
Oh, okay, that's cool. So so yeah, that sounds a lot like the Irish. They talk funny and they drink a lot.
Yeah, but we talk even funnier like the Norwegians.
That's true. No. And in London, we talk miserable and complaining and moaning about something. To be honest, I think,
You have a lot of different dialects in London.
yeah, different regions, different strokes. I mean, you got Essex, you got no. One thing I must
That's
say.
where I used to live.
Oh God, I feel for you. And I want to say one thing as well. How do you feel when you're on the public transport in London? Because I mean, that probably maybe put you off and made you want to come back to Iceland. I think that's the thing that would make anyone want to leave.
Especially in the summer. I mean, it's dangerous. I mean, literally, people die on the tube in the summer. So yeah, no, that's terrible. And again, like as I say, everything takes such a long time, and public transport is a part of that. It just takes forever to get from A to B. Oh yeah, the tube, absolutely, it's just murder and expensive. You pay a lot of money to be miserable for a long time. There's nothing really good about it.
It really is bad because I mean, like in Paris or in New York or Chicago, it only costs like $100 for a month, and you can travel anywhere. In London, that barely covers you for a week. Like it's £71 for an entire week to cover all zones.
Yeah, I know. It's horrible. I mean, and it's inefficient and confusing. Like in Copenhagen, the metro system in Copenhagen is wonderful. You can get from anywhere to any other place just in a matter of minutes. It's absolutely fantastic, and so many trains that they're never really overcrowded except during the peak hours. It's great. Of course, that's a pretty recent. Is there a ghost behind you?
No, that was my. Yes, there is a ghost. No, it's my. Well, my parents are here. So they.
Okay, all right. They are alive.
Yes, at last I checked. I
Okay,
mean,
good.
it's quite a podcast to have ghosts on. I mean, it's probably happened before, but it would be funny to see.
It's the undead podcast. That would be great. But yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think I'll ever live in London again, if only so that I never have to use the public transport system. Well, if I go to London, I guess I'll have to do it. But it's fine for a vacation, but not for as a lifestyle. I don't want to do that.
It's silly, isn't it? Oh, there is one. So there's two. You've brought about two questions in my mind, and one question I ask is, how do you alter the music? And you said you've done comedy as well. How do you have to alter it when you're doing English comedy and music as well, mixed in with Icelandic music and comedy?
Well, I haven't done much comedy in English, although, like I said, I do walking tours in Reykjavik, and that's kind of my comedic outlet these days. And I find that for me at this stage, because I've been for now, I guess, 15 years, I've been doing so much gigging in front of people who are not Icelandic that and also, I mean, I'm a translator as well. So my English at this point is probably equally good as my Icelandic, and I think in English, which is, someone said that's when you're fluent in a language, when you can think in that language. And I think at this point, I've spent enough time doing all of this stuff that it's telling jokes in English for me is the same, if not easier, than in Icelandic at this point. When it comes to music, I've only recently started writing music to any extent in Icelandic. Most of my music that I've written throughout my adult life has been in English. And the reason for that is that Icelandic is pretty hard to sing because of the way that the sort of rhythm of the language works. It can sound very beautiful when it's sung, but it is a bit trickier to fit to music, especially because in Icelandic, the emphasis is always on the first syllable of a word. There is not a single word in the Icelandic language where it's different. The emphasis is always on the first syllable, which can be very tricky when you're singing because it sounds very strange if the melody forces you to put the emphasis on a different syllable. So just that part, just piecing the syllables together to sing, can be very difficult. And also, if you want to write proper lyrics or proper poetry in general in Icelandic, there are a lot of standard rules like alliteration. There should always be alliteration. Do you know? I don't know how well, because I don't know. I know that, yeah, you know what it is. Anyway, I know that in English poetry, it's not that common. But that's like, if you're writing a proper poem, unless it's a non, not if it's a classical style of poetry, then you should always use alliteration. And there are very specific rules for how to do that. So just the rules of poetry in Icelandic are tricky. And that's one of the reasons why I've struggled with it in the past, because it takes a long time to write a proper lyric in Icelandic. Whereas for me, writing in English is no problem at all. But now recently, a friend of mine, I sent him a song that I recorded for my album, and he said, "That's great. Now you should start writing in Icelandic." And I can resist anything except a challenge. So I started doing that. And I do find, although I have a lot of songs in Icelandic because I've worked on so many theater productions where I've written a lot of songs to pre-existing Icelandic lyrics that somebody else has written. So, and I've found that because I've been, that's one thing that I forgot to mention, is that through tourism, I've done a lot of sort of special gigs. I'll come back to that because that's actually a pretty good source of revenue. But because I've been performing for tourists a lot, I've found that singing songs in Icelandic tends to be very, very popular for people who are, from other countries who are visiting Iceland. So I have been performing those theater songs because they're in Icelandic. But I guess, I don't know, the difference, I don't think there is much of a difference, at least not for me, because like you said earlier, I mean, music is so universal.
Yeah.
But there are, in both cases, music and comedy, the languages, English and Icelandic, they're very, very different. And so you need to have a very attuned ear in order to be able to like write a joke in English. You need to understand. It's about much more than understanding what the words mean or having a good vocabulary or whatever. You need an ear for the timing, because the timing's very different between English and Icelandic. So I guess in that sense it is different, and it's the same goes for music. Certain melodies work very well for Icelandic lyrics, and certain melodies work very well for English lyrics, and they're going to be different because the inflections and the rhythms of the two languages are just so different.
Yeah, it's funny. I've heard with people, like, one thing that's very hard about comedy in different languages is that, and also I've sort of thought about myself, is that not only do you have to get the vocabulary and the syntax right, you've got to understand like the way the other language thinks, and the way the culture and the way it's set up. It's just that's what makes it difficult. Not like, I mean, learning the words in another language is hard enough, but having to like understand the rules and the way the language works and the culture of another nation, that's what makes it really hard.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of my strengths lie, because I've been working as a translator for TV subtitles for 15 years, mostly American stuff, but also some English stuff. And that way, I've become very attuned to to the way that the language works, to the way the culture works, to a lot of cultural references, and the way certain subsets of those communities think. And I think that's it really helps to, because what I always say is, when you're trying to create something, especially I think when you're trying to create comedy, is you need to think three-dimensionally. So if you have a concept that you want to, whether you want to write a song about it or a joke about it or whatever, you need to be able to take that concept and take it from a two-dimensional idea and turn it into a three-dimensional idea, so you can turn it upside down and backwards and front and see it from all the different sides, because that's where you find something interesting to say. Does that make sense?
Yeah. What do you mean different sides?
So like when it's like when you're, if I'm trying to make something funny, which I've had to do for this walking tour that I've done, I'm looking at a statue or a building or something, and I'm thinking, okay, so how can I tell a joke about this? It's just a statue. Then I'll think, okay, why, I'll say, why is this and why not? And just try to think of the concept of the statue, not the statue itself, but the concept of this certain statue from a lot of different angles. So why is this statue not whatever? It's like there was I remember a statue that I used to go past on the tour, and it has it's just a normal statue. There's nothing special about the statue itself. I mean, it's obviously an important person, but the pedestal underneath the statue, or the plinth, is bigger than normal. And so I started to think, okay, why is the plinth that big? And so that led to a joke that I used to tell, is that, well, they started with the pedestal and then they ran out of money, so they had to make the statue very small, which was just a kind of a way to think about the concept of that statue from a different angle. Not the best joke, but that's sort of how I think about it. And it's the same with writing music, if you think, okay, I'm going to write a music about a person who's, I don't know, I remember this one time I heard somebody going through, it was just a person at a bar crying about something to her friends, about her ex-boyfriend having a new girlfriend or something. And so I decided to write a joke about, not a joke, a song about that. That's a terrible thing to joke about. Write a song about that. And so that sort of because that could have been a very sappy and boring song. It's a very it's a concept that's been done to death. But I just, I took it, and I took the concept of being in that position, and I started to look at it from all the different angles. Why is this person going through this? Why not something else? That sort of thing. And that's what I refer to as thinking three-dimensionally about a concept or an idea, if that makes sense.
But how do you flip it back so that it can work for people in Iceland as well, as opposed to just people from another nation?
So the what can work? I'm sorry.
So if you make a joke, like you said about the statue, how do you flip it so that it works for people within your own nation as well, rather than just from the foreign aspect?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of those things are exactly how that works, because and I have done this actually, I have taken Icelanders on the tour and given them, you say, you can be a tourist in your own city, and we've actually done that quite a few times, and that takes a kind of a different approach, but it's actually in some ways easier, because there you take a place or building or a statue or concept or whatever that people are already very familiar with, and then you turn it upside down and look at it from a different angle, and that makes it actually much funnier, because a lot of the times if you live somewhere, you don't really look at your surroundings as carefully as somebody who's visiting. I mean, if you live in downtown London and you cross Leicester Square every day, then you probably don't think very much about the buildings around the square. So if somebody was to point out a certain building there and say, that whatever, show it to you from a different angle than you've looked at it before, that's probably going to be interesting and funny to you. I can't really reference anything on Leicester Square. I don't know why I said that. I don't have a joke to go with this story. It's just I just mentioned something.
But okay, and so going on that, what I've said here, what advice would you give for someone? I mean, effectively, you're a freelancer, but you're not necessarily in a position where you have to work for anyone else or work in a place where you're filled with people you can't stand for money.
Nope.
And
no, I can absolutely control. I get offered assignments that pay money, and I do them as much as I need to, and then when I have music projects, I'm right now, I should have been in a very in a very good show where I wrote the music and I'm performing, but that's not happening because the theaters are closed. So I'm having to do other work. But yes, I work for myself.
But that is sort of the ideal sort of position to be in. I mean, what advice would you give for someone who is, you've seen London and you've seen like working in like McDonald's or something. If someone has a dream to do something, but they're stuck in McDonald's being told that they're a waste of space all the time, how do they get out of that? What advice do you have?
Well, I think that depends a lot on where you're at in life. I mean, what stage of life you're in. Somebody my age, I mean, I'm pretty old, and I have a family. So, if somebody in that position obviously is not going to just up and quit and go take a leap, because then it could be too big of a risk. But if you are someone like you who is younger and doesn't have all those commitments and all that to lose, then I would say there is a lot to be said for just taking the leap. But it's all about, just like I said before, is you need to have goals. You need to know, you have a direction, know where you're headed. I mean, what is it that you're good at? And like maybe you need to identify the opportunities in that field, the ideal ones, the ones that you want to get to, the ones that are your dream, but also the stepping stones. Because very few people are able to go from working at McDonald's to being the next Justin Bieber. And that's lightning. It's getting struck by lightning. It happens to almost no one. But if you're a musician, then go out and identify, how can you get there incrementally? What are you good at? If you're a person who's very good at playing the guitar and singing, then maybe do that stuff that I don't do anymore. Go out and earn money by playing cover songs at some bars where, you get paid a little bit and you get to play music every night if you're, if you have the connections and you're able to get that done. Do that. That's how I ended up in doing translation work. Originally my dream was to be a writer. And so I started, I had a job as a copywriter, that fell through. And then I got a job as a translator, and I was, at least I'm writing words every day. It's not my end goal, but I control my time, and I can say yes or no. I don't have I don't have to go in at a certain time. I don't have to go anywhere. I work from home, and I can say yes or no to assignments that I'm offered. So that's a great stepping stone. And I've been doing that for a while, and now I do a lot of other things because I've used that as a bridge to get to where I wanted to go. So, get that. If you want to be a musician, try to get any job that pays money to play music. Even if it's not the most fun, just do that, but always keep your eye on the goal. The mistake that I've made in the past was that I got complacent in this because it was a convenient job, but it was not my end goal. So, now I've started working, and over the past few years, I've started working much more diligently towards getting more different types of work, having music opportunities open to me, having these theater jobs, doing a podcast and doing all of these different things that excite me, and getting closer and closer to being, I don't want to say to being where I want to be, because I don't think there's ever an end. You're never done. I think, you're always reaching for something new. If you're a creative person, I think there's always a next goal, a next step. But I think, setting short-term goals and also setting long-term goals is very important. And, be realistic, but also aim high, and see what opportunities you have around you for getting anything that pays. And also, you need to be you need to work very hard doing things that don't pay as well. I mean, you do need to network. You do need to spend a lot of time getting your name out there, whether it's on social media or, doing podcast interviews, or even traditional PR, I think is not worthless. So yeah, those would be, I think, at least my advice for somebody who's just starting out, is to just chart your route and see what stepping stones are along the way and what opportunities you have around you.
Okay. And what do you make of people who, there's two other questions I want to follow up with. What do you make of people who get how they can handle their envy or jealousy of people that are doing well better than them? Because that happens a lot in creative arts.
Oh,
Oh no, oh no.
yeah, that's my. I hate that. That's my number one. Not even pet peeve. I just actively can't stand that way of thinking because I think when you do that, when you think like that, you're letting other people control the way you feel, which you should never do. You should always be in control of as much of what you're feeling as you can. Uh, you should never give anybody else control over your own emotions. And also, art is never a competition. There's never, I mean, art is the most, regardless of whether, like, this is not politics, and I don't want to sound like a communist or whatever, but I think art is the least capitalist field there is because I don't think you're ever in a position where your success is harmful to others or somebody else's success is hurting you. Uh, I don't think that's ever a valid point because somebody else, just because somebody else got a job that you may have wanted, the reason you didn't get it, there's probably a reason for it, and it's not about the person who got the job. It's about you and the person who did the hiring. It's never about the person who got the job instead of you. And I think that if you can, for me, I've always had the idea that if I can connect with other artists and if I can help other artists in any way that I can, and if I can have relationships with our other artists where we help each other to build each other up, and that's the sort of philosophy behind that Melodica Music Festival that I mentioned before. Because that way, everybody wins. There's never, you have, if you have a big network and everybody works together, then it's always going to be beneficial for everybody. And I've just never understood that idea that somehow it's a competition or somehow, that person's success is something that I should be jealous of. I think that I'm always happy for other people who enjoy more success than I do. And also for people who are enjoying their first success or who are sort of coming up. And I never feel protective because I think that, when somebody, especially in music, if my friend is getting a lot of people to listen to his or her music, then that eventually, that's my feeling is that's going to be beneficial to me as well, because this is a person that's in my orbit, and so their fans, they're likely to check out some of my stuff if we're doing similar styles of music. So I think if you're in a group of artists and everybody's doing things in the same ballpark, then having more of you in that orbit is going to spread the people, because people don't buy just one album. They buy a lot of albums. If people don't really buy albums anymore, but if somebody follows you or buys a ticket to your show or something, that's not going to be the last show they ever go to. They're going to go to more shows. And if I warm up for somebody who's more successful than I am, then their fans are going to hear me. So collaboration like that, I think, is always going to be more beneficial. And I think if you set aside that jealousy and that pettiness, and make a point of helping out other people. I think we can call it karma even or something, but I think it's always going to come back to you in a positive way. Actually, one of the first episodes that I did of my podcast, I interviewed a world-class photographer. His name is Walid Azami, and he's photographed people like Madonna and Jennifer Lopez and a lot of different people. And that's his whole philosophy. He makes a point of helping out a lot of up and coming photographers. He'll select people from his mailing list or his Instagram following and invite them to come along and watch him as he works, so they can learn from his photo shoots. And he doesn't have to do that. He's a very well respected photographer, but he does it because he believes that that's going to come back to him, and that it helps him not only as a person, but also as a photographer, and that it helps him in his business. And I'm sure it does, because he has a huge following on social media, and he sells books and I think online courses and stuff like that. So it's definitely not just beneficial for him just to have this image as a good guy, but I'm sure it's helping him to make more money too. And I think it's the same with anybody. I think that's, for me, after talking to him especially, I just think, how can I help people who are not as far along as I am, or even people who are further along? I mean, if somebody asks me for help, my immediate response is, yes, I want to help you.
Yeah, and you don't know when you might need them. So.
Exactly. Like I always say, if you want to know who your friends are, ask them to help you move a body. That's how you know you're real friends.
All right, that's
sorry.
That's okay. that is brilliant.
Not a couch, a body. I need to bury this thing. Can you help me? And that's only your real friends are going to say yes to that.
Okay, I'm gonna ask my parents now.
But I wanted to say, because I forgot to mention it before when you were asking about revenue. One of the biggest things I discovered last year, which unfortunately doesn't work anymore, but it will again, I'm sure, is Airbnb experiences. And I think no matter what you do, if you're a musician, or you could do it if you're a comedian or a painter or writer, anything, you can set up an experience for visitors in your area. And these are small events. You can charge premium prices. You can bring people to your house, or you can take them on a walk around or something. You can show them whatever and introduce them to your art while you're at it. Just think outside the box. What I was doing was doing house concerts in my living room. So tourists would come. They would pay, I don't know, it was 30 euros or something to come to my house, have a drink and a snack, and I'd play them songs for an hour. And I think that's a great it doesn't, obviously right now it's not, but when the whole mess is over, that's something to really look into for any kind of artist, I think, is setting up an experience through Airbnb experiences. I don't think it's available everywhere in the world yet, but it's in most markets, I think it is.
Yeah, and then when they do that, sort of merchandise it so it lasts forever. Like you can say, oh, if you want to find out more, go here, go there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I used to do. Is people would come over, they'd have a snack, and I'd play, and we'd chat, tell stories, and all that kind of stuff. And then I'd have CDs and T-shirts and vinyl records and stuff for sale if they wanted, and usually people bought something. So that's actually, I would make decent money for each of those, even if it was just 2 or 3 people. You know, they were. I mean, the tickets are more expensive than a normal concert ticket, and you have stuff for sale as well. And you can do that. If you're a writer, you can have a reading, read from your work and tell stories and do all kinds of things. If you're a painter, you can bring people and show them your studio. And again, if you're a comedian, you can do a little comedy walk around your area or something. So I think that was a game changer for me last year.
One thing that I do, yeah, because it's funny that you bring that up, because I spoke to a magician, what's it called, a few days ago, and you saying that you perform for an hour in music. Now, the thing with comedians, when we put on a show, we're lucky to get maybe, in the UK anyway, like 15, 20 minutes. And like most of the time we do maybe 5 or 10 spots. And I'm quite intrigued by that, because that is a massive deal of stage time, like to perform an hour and then 20 minutes. And if you add that up over a year, there is that bloody, I'm feeling, in some respects, it means that a comedian has less limited time to test their things out. But in other ways, that's one thing I find quite interesting, because in magic or in music, you've got a lot more chance to test things out. Whilst a comedian, you have to really sort of prove that you're worth the time that you're showing.
Yeah, but it depends on what you're doing. When you're starting out as a musician here, usually you'll be playing open mics or small festivals, and there you might only have 20, 30 minutes. Again, I've been playing for a very long time, and I'll do an hour and a half, 2 hours easy. But yes, you're right. I mean, there's in terms of just honing your craft as a performer and increasing your confidence on stage, then yes, I mean, playing for that amount of time really does a lot. But I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing, because the thing about comedy is that it's like concentrated performance. Because when you're doing stand-up comedy, it's intense, and you only have a microphone and that's it. And if you mess up, then there's nothing. You can't hide it. If you have a guitar or a piano or whatever, you've got some buffer. Sing the wrong note, just cover it up. And so it's a lot more relaxed. When I used to do stand-up comedy, I mean, I do 10 minutes and it's like rapid fire. It's like a machine gun in your brain, because you always have to be thinking, what's my next punchline? Where am I going next? And you need to be very alert when I'm playing music on stage. It's a lot more relaxed.
And one thing, maybe one of the other things as well, because like a magician, they've got all these sort of tricks. So if one doesn't work, they could easily sort of go into another one. Whilst a comedian, the majority of the time, they're just sitting on stage telling jokes. So there's less things to cover for themselves. Like magicians, they got music, they got sound, they got music, they got all these. Yeah.
I've always said that stand-up comedy is the purest form of performance, because you don't have anything except your brain. It's like performing naked. There's nothing to cover you up, and I don't think there's any, except maybe which is sort of the same thing, an actor doing a monologue on stage, sort of the same thing, except of course the worst that happens to him is that he's boring, which is sort of expected when an actor does a monologue. But a comedian, there's no margin for error, and you're either funny or you're not. And there's no buffer.
No. Well, one thing that I also wanted to get at as well, I think in comedy, you can. Well, one thing I found in certain respects, there's a lot of. I think a good number of comedians are more writing based than performance based. But then there's also a number of them that are performance based and not necessarily writing based, and they said that you're one or the other. One thing I will say, I think if a comedian is to be truly proper and international and really good, a lot of it is just based on their persona and how they are. I mean, like if you look at people like Patrice O'Neill or Bill Burr, a lot of it that gets them through is their persona rather than just what's written. What written enhances it. And people say if you,
I think that's true for.
sorry,
Yeah, I think that's true for every kind of artist, though. I think that knowing who you are deep down and doing that, being true to that, and being yourself is the number one thing. You need to find your voice before you can do anything truly remarkable. There's a great, one of my favorite quotes in the world, and unfortunately, I don't know who said this. I've Googled the hell out of it, and I just cannot find it. It was some musician. It might have been Quincy Jones, but I'm not sure. Anyway, the quote is, "Find out who you are, and then be the shit out of that." And I think that's the number one thing in any creative field. You just got to find out who you are and then be it with your whole being. And that's, I mean, that's certainly true of Eddie Izzard. That's why he's so effective, no matter what the language, whatever he's doing. And of course, he'll walk on stage and large part of his show will be improvised. And that doesn't work for a lot of musicians, not because they're not great at improvising necessarily. It's just that it's just not them. But it very definitely is Eddie Izzard, I think. And so that, I mean, it's the same for a musician, I think. Especially a performing artist. I think that you can have a great song and you can perform it well, but unless, let's say it's not your own song, I mean, unless you have a truly, I don't want to say unique voice, but unless you have an honest voice, a voice that is really you and you're being your whole self, then it's karaoke. It's not going to be a truly authentic experience unless you're 100% you. That's fine.
But yeah, you were saying, of course, you got to find your your own voice, and that's what it's all about, and beat the shit.
Be the shit out of it.
Yeah, I think. But one thing I've found in comedy, and perhaps a lot of other, I think just in general, with a lot of people in general, I think people spend their entire lives not finding out their voice, not finding their voice. I think people.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Yeah, and I don't know if there are any sort of way. I mean, I spent a long time searching for my voice, and I hope I found it. But I don't know if I ever did as a comedian, but as a musician, I believe I've sort of found it. Of course, it's again, like I said before, you're always searching for the next thing. You never stop searching. It's always a journey. But I think that it can take a long time, and you need to always be looking. And I think a very important thing that's very hard to do, but probably one of the most important things, one of the most important skills to develop, is to be able to look critically at yourself and what you're doing, and to sort of not, and there's a fine line there, because there's also anxiety and imposter syndrome and a lot of things that a lot of creative people struggle with. So you need to be careful that you're not tearing yourself down. But I think you have to look at what you've been doing. And I know that when I was in comedy, I recorded every show I did, and I listened to it, and I analyzed everything, and I said, okay, am I doing what I need to be doing? And that's a part of finding your voice, is being critical and thinking, all right, because we're all imitating someone. That's inevitable. We're all we have our influences, and especially when we're starting out, then that's all we know how to do, is to imitate someone. And I think Tom Waits said that every artist is imitating another artist and doing a bad job. And that's how you sound like you, is you're just a bad imitation of somebody else. So I think you need to be aware of who are my influences, and how much like them do I sound, and admit to yourself if you do sound or look or speak or whatever like those influences too much. Then maybe you need to try to tone that down, add in new influences, and try to figure out what it is that you do. And I think a lot of the times when you actually do end up finding your voice and finding something unique is when different influences come together and turn into something new.
You'll find it through just the journey. Don't try and force it. You'll just find it by trying different things, and then eventually,
Yeah, I think so. And that's where the live aspect comes in as well. I think you feel it. I think it's easier to do this. I think it's easier to find this if you're a performing artist than if you're say a musician who just does writes music for others, or just records and sells music, or it's just a Spotify thing. I think being in a room of people as a comedian or as a musician or whatever, you feel it when you've struck it, when you start to talk or sing or whatever, and you're not just an imitation of somebody else anymore, and you feel that feedback. I think that's a very good way to feel it. I'm sure there are ways to feel it, I think, if you're not on stage, but I think performing live is really the best place to discover those things.
Yeah. It's but I think I see it a lot of the times. A lot of people, even despite those things, they want to go with the tried and tested, or what they know to be the standard way of doing things, rather than like wanting to enjoy themselves and be themselves. They like to be caricatures of people they admire. But
and I mean, that's what I used to do. I mean, full disclosure, when I was starting out as a musician, I would go on stage and imitate my favorite artists. And it probably took a year or two to sort of get that out of my system before I started just trying to be myself and trying to look for my unique voice. And I think I still have a lot of those old artists. Well, I don't think it, I know it. I still have a lot of those artists that I started out imitating in my DNA as an artist. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, because you can't be 100% unique. It's not possible, unless you're playing, unless you're building your own instruments and, playing scales that no one's ever played before as a musician. You're always following in somebody else's footsteps, and you're always, I mean, it's different in comedy, but in music, every chord progression has been done. You can't create a new chord progression. It's going to sound terrible. You can't be 100% unique. You can't invent the wheel. It's been done so many times before, and I'm sure as a comedian, at least a few examples of comedians who have told the same joke as somebody else without having actually heard that joke. It's
Yeah.
just people have the same ideas. So it's not possible to be completely different because there are just too many of us. and I think that trying too hard to be completely unique can be just as bad as imitating someone, because it's going to be pretentious, first of all. And also, I think there is something to be said for familiarity. If you're looking at a film, if you're watching a movie, there are always going to be references to old movies, or you're going to hear a song that you already know in the movie or something. And it's going to be pleasant because it's familiar. So I think it's not about doing something that's completely unfamiliar. I think it's more about taking the familiar stuff that you're working with and putting it in a new context. There again, it's what I said before, thinking in 3 dimensions. You're saying, all right, I got this. If I'm writing a blues song, there are millions of blues songs, but I can think, okay, how can I make this blues song sound like me and not like the Rolling Stones or whatever?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think, yeah. Okay. And the main way to add on top of that, without being pretentious of trying to be unique, is to try different things out, explore maybe different fields, or speak to different people and try different ideas that you think are interesting. And that way you feel both ends of the things.
Exactly. And I mean, going back to comedy and trying to be unique, comedians have a finite number of things they can actually talk about. There's a finite number of topics. You can't, because if you go out there and you talk about something that people don't know anything about, then they're not going to laugh because they don't understand what you're saying. That's why jokes about your family or airplanes or cats work. It's because everybody can relate to those things. And without relatability, you can't be funny. So trying to reinvent the wheel never works.
What you do is you take bits of different wheels and then you put it together to form your own thing.
Exactly. It's still a wheel. You just build your own wheel.
Yeah.
But it's still essentially a wheel. And so, as you take this known entity that is a joke about an airplane, and you do it as you, not as an imitation of somebody else, but it's still a known idea, a known entity that you're doing. You just need to figure out your way to approach it that's uniquely yours.
Yeah, I think perhaps maybe the reason for maybe a lack of it looks very dark here, doesn't it, in my room? Looks like a ghost town.
Yes, it does. Yeah. It's again, I'm getting more and more convinced that your house is haunted.
It's almost. I'll turn this off. Now it's better. No, the thing is, I think
I remember how much electricity costs in England. Don't worry.
I think the reason for maybe people not forming the voices is maybe they get too comfortable doing a certain thing, and then they don't want to go on the journey or the process of doing things. They don't enjoy it, or they don't want to do it.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, that's the thing also when we talk about, turning your dream into your job or whatever, it's still a job. And there are still going to be things that are not enjoyable. It doesn't matter how passionate you are about what you do for a living or how much you enjoy it. you're always going to have to do some things that are not fun, and you are going to have days where you're not enjoying yourself, and because otherwise it's a hobby. That's the difference between a job and a hobby. Even if you're getting paid, if there's never a part of it that's not enjoyable, then it's not your job. I guarantee it. Because that means that you stop working when you're not enjoying yourself, because there is nothing in the world that doesn't have a boring side. And when if you're going to be working for yourself as a creative entrepreneur or whatever, you need to take care of the business side of it. There's marketing that needs to happen. You have to do your taxes. There are always going to be things that are not fun. And the trick is to still do those things. That's how you ultimately succeed doing it, is because it's very easy to show up for the fun days. The tricky part is showing up for the hard days.
Yeah. That's in a lot of sort of motivational things, they don't always sort of talk so much about that. They try and say, oh, you can do this, you can be inspired, but they don't always go into that aspect.
Yeah, and I think that the trick is to keep going when you're not inspired. It's very easy to when you feel you're pumped up and you're excited and you're inspired to start doing things, and then it's not so bad to do the whatever it is, whatever part of your line of work you don't enjoy. But then it's raining outside, it's a Tuesday, it's early, you feel like shit, and you still have to show up and you have to do the work, because if you don't, then you fail. And like I said before, it's so easy to flake on yourself when there's no boss standing over your shoulder. It's so easy to say, yeah, I'll do this tomorrow, and then you never do it. Just showing up and doing the work, that's like 60% of it is just forcing yourself to do the things that you don't enjoy doing. And I got great advice today, actually, which is just trick yourself into doing those things. Just say, all right, I'm going to do it for 3 minutes and then I'll stop. But then 3 minutes turns into 5 minutes, and then just keep going. And it's like it's like a space shuttle launch. You've seen those videos of space shuttle being launched, and there's all this energy, all this rocket fuel that's burning, and it's this giant. Nobody can be like anywhere near it because they'll be burned to a crisp. And there's so much energy that goes into lifting it off the ground. But then as soon as it's outside of the atmosphere of Earth, then it just keeps going forever on its own. And I think that's usually just getting started is the hardest part when it's something that you don't enjoy doing. So just as soon as you get a little bit of momentum, then you can keep going for days. I've been writing a novel lately, and I write in the morning, and I never feel like getting started. I always say, man, I just want to sleep a little bit longer, and but I just say, all right, if I'll at least write one sentence, and then that turns into 2 and 3, and then I'll have finished my quota for the day sooner than I thought, and it goes very well. So I think that's, if I had to give a little bit more advice from before to anybody starting out, when you have a day where you have to do some stuff that's boring and you don't want to do it, just at least get started.
Yeah. There's a lot of things to unpack there. It's definitely, it's funny. Your mind's very, very funny thing. It only takes one little thing to change it.
Yep. We tend to always look at the worst possible outcome of everything. I think that's a very human thing to do. That's sort of how I think that's why we humans in general enjoy horror movies and scary stories. It's because our mind, whenever there's something that we're not sure about, our mind immediately jumps to the worst possible outcome. And so a horror movie, then you'll actually see the worst possible outcome, and that's very gets a little bit enjoyable.
See you later.
And and I think that yeah, it's fine. I think that's what we do. That's where anxiety comes from as well, and that's procrastination too. It's you look at the project or the task at hand, and it feels much bigger than it actually is. And as soon as you just get started, just write one sentence, read one page of the book you're supposed to read for school, whatever it is, as soon as you just start, that's the biggest hurdle. It's just to start. And then, you discover that your mind is constantly playing tricks on you.
To keep you where it's comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, change is scary. And that's another thing that makes it hard to get sort of going as in terms of changing your life in any way. Change, even positive change, is scary to us because the human brain wants to have everything under control and be in a place where it knows its surroundings. And I think that's probably a very dangerous part of the situation we're all in everywhere in the world now is, we're all, in most places, we're kind of locked up, and it's easy to get, I don't even know when I last saw a person that was not my family. It's like 3 weeks or something, which is, I think that's probably pretty dangerous to, because you can get sort of stuck in that place.
One thing I want to ask, you're saying it is very true that you can trick yourself, but how do you sort of hold yourself accountable and not let yourself get away with things?
Well, again, one of the things that I do is just make sure to write it down and in a plan. So this is what I'm going to do today. And I have I should take this off before, going to bed or whatever. And I find that helps me to sort of finish things sometimes, not always. Having an accountability partner or group, I think, is very good as well. If there's something that you're working on where, again, you don't have somewhere to show up. If you're a musician, you can set a goal or if you're a comedian, you can set a goal of doing a certain performance and you can book it. And that's going to keep you accountable because you have it booked. You need to show up for the booking. Again, not right now, but it could happen. But I think having somebody else sort of keep you accountable is a very good strategy as well. To just, I did that when I was trying to get my first album finished. I started a Facebook group and I had a bunch of my family and friends just cheer me on, really, just sort of get it done.
Yeah. It's that's something I'm trying to set up as well with one mate of mine. I'm gonna do that with some of the things I'm working on, and then we're gonna I think
it's a great idea.
What we're gonna do is I'm gonna write down what I want to do. He's gonna write down what he wants to do, and then we'll meet at the end of the week and then see what the week.
That's a great idea. Actually, I have a podcast episode about accountability partnerships where I talked to a woman who was my accountability partner at the time. And we sort of went into a whole lot of detail about how that can help and sort of how we did it and practical things related to that and what to do and what possible pitfalls and things like that. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, send me the link and I'll have a look.
Yeah, you can. I'll tell you now as well. It's artemist.net/AP2. I'm pretty sure it's AP2. No, it's not AP2. It's AP4. That's right. AP2 is different.
AP4. Okay. Yeah, it's nice.
Is that right?
Yep, got it.
There you go.
Just want to say, yeah, thank you very much for appearing on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this has been fun. And can I plug my stuff?
Yes, go ahead. Share whatever you got.
All right. Well, I have I have the podcast, which is all about making money from your art. And that's at artemist.net. It's a play on words like alchemist, but it's Artemist because it turns art into gold. And it's artemist.net. And if anybody wants to check out my music, they can go to onebadday.is. So onebadday.is. So that's my stuff.
Oh, awesome. And hit me up with any like social media handles that you have and like
Sure.
And yeah, I'm going to advertise it on the podcast when it's uploaded.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much.
And yeah, take care and I will speak to you soon.
All right.
Wonderful.